The gunshot that killed Clara Crane's mother never came, but the sight of her father's trembling hand accepting those 20 silver dollars felt worse than any bullet. Eliza Crane stood in the dusty parlor of their ramshackle home on the outskirts of Ukiah, California, her eyes wide with disbelief as the man she had married 17 years ago counted coins with shaking fingers while a stranger waited by the door. It was August of 1873, and the summer heat had turned the valley into an oven, baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. "Thomas, you cannot be serious," Eliza whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. She clutched her worn shawl around her shoulders despite the oppressive warmth, as if the thin fabric could protect her from what was happening. Thomas Crane would not meet her eyes. His breath reeked of whiskey and his hands shook as he pocketed the money. "It is done, Eliza. You belong to Mr. Garrett now. He will treat you better than I ever could." The man by the door stepped forward, his boots heavy on the warped floorboards. Marcus Garrett was a cattle baron from Sacramento, a man whose wealth came from land stolen and blood spilled. He was perhaps 45 years old, with cold gray eyes and a mouth that never smiled. "Come along, Mrs. Crane. We have a long ride ahead." Clara watched from the doorway of her small bedroom, her 17-year-old heart hammering against her ribs. She had been preparing supper when the stranger arrived, had heard the low murmur of male voices and then her mother's cry of shock. Now she stood frozen, a wooden spoon still gripped in her hand, trying to understand how the world had turned so savage in the span of minutes. "Mama." Her voice came out small, childlike. Eliza turned, and the look on her face nearly broke Clara in two. There was terror there, yes, but also a terrible resignation, as if she had always known this day would come. "Clara, my sweet girl, take care of yourself." "Do not let anyone enough," Garrett said, grabbing Eliza's arm. "Say your goodbyes quickly." "No." Clara dropped the spoon and rushed forward, but her father caught her, his grip surprisingly strong for a man who could barely stand straight. "Papa, you cannot let him take her. She is your wife." Thomas Crane finally looked at his daughter, and what she saw in his bloodshot eyes made her stomach turn. Shame, guilt, but underneath it all, relief. He was relieved to be rid of his wife, relieved to have drinking money, relieved to escape the responsibility of a family he had never wanted. "It is already done, girl. Best you accept it." "I will not accept it." Clara wrenched herself free and ran to her mother, throwing her arms around her. Eliza smelled like lavender and bread dough, like every safe morning of Clara's childhood. "Mama, I will come for you, I swear it." "Clara," Eliza's voice broke. She cupped her daughter's face in both hands, memorizing every feature. "You cannot. He is too powerful too. I will find a way." Clara's voice was steel now, all the softness burned away by fury. "I do not care how long it takes or what I must do. I will bring you home." Garrett yanked Eliza away with enough force to make her stumble. "Touching. Now move." Clara lunged for him, but her father held her back again, and she watched helplessly as Marcus Garrett dragged her mother out into the blazing afternoon. A black carriage waited in the dirt road, its windows curtained. Eliza looked back once, her face white with fear, and then she was pushed inside and the door slammed shut. The carriage rolled away in a cloud of dust, and Clara stood in the doorway of her ruined home, watching until it disappeared around the bend toward the Sacramento road. Her father stumbled back inside, already reaching for another bottle he had hidden behind the woodpile. "Do not look at me like that," he muttered. "We needed the money. Garrett offered a fair price." "A fair price?" Clara's voice was dangerously quiet. "You sold your wife like she was a horse. She will have a better life with him, fine dresses, a big house. She loved you." The words came out like stones, And you traded her for whiskey money." Thomas Crane's face crumpled, but Clara felt no pity. She turned away from him and walked to her bedroom, closing the door carefully because she wanted to slam it so badly her hands shook. She sat on her narrow bed and stared at the wall, her mind racing. Marcus Garrett was one of the richest men in California, with a ranch that sprawled across thousands of acres and hired guns who protected his interests. He had connections to politicians and lawmen, men who would look the other way no matter what he did. Her father had sold her mother to a man who was essentially untouchable, but Clara had made a promise, and she meant to keep it. She waited until her father passed out in his chair, the bottle empty beside him, before she moved. She packed a small bag with her few possessions: 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, a silver locket that had belonged to her grandmother. She took the money her mother had hidden in a tin under the floorboards, $17.40 that represented 2 years of doing laundry for the women in town. She took her father's old revolver from the drawer, checking to make sure it was loaded. Then she walked out of the house and did not look back. Ukiah was a growing town, swollen with people seeking their fortunes in the lumber industry and the fertile valleys beyond. Clara walked through the darkening streets, past the saloons where rough laughter spilled out into the night, past the general store and the church, and the hotel where respectable families stayed. She was looking for a specific place, one her mother had warned her never to go near. The Silver Spur Saloon sat at the edge of town, a rambling 2-story building with peeling paint and a reputation for trouble. Clara pushed through the doors and stepped into a wall of noise and smoke. Men turned to stare at her, their eyes crawling over her in a way that made her skin prickle, but she kept her chin high and walked to the bar. The bartender was a heavy-set man with a scar across his cheek. "We do not serve girls here." "I am not looking for a drink," Clara said. "I am looking for Owen Tucker." The name caused a ripple of reaction through the room. Men exchanged glances, and the bartender's expression grew wary. "What business does a girl like you have with Tucker? That is between him and me. Tucker does not like to be bothered." Clara pulled out a $5 gold piece and set it on the bar. "Tell him there is someone here who wants to hire him. Tell him it is about Marcus Garrett." The bartender looked at the coin, then at Clara's face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "Wait here." He disappeared up the stairs at the back of the room, and Clara stood at the bar, acutely aware of the eyes on her. A man sidled up beside her, whiskey stinking and leering. "What is a pretty thing like you doing in a place like this?" "Leaving," Clara said coldly, "if you do not step away." Something in her voice must have warned him, because he backed off with a muttered curse. Clara's heart was hammering, but she kept her hand near the revolver in her bag. The bartender came back down. "Tucker will see you. Room 6, upstairs." Clara climbed the stairs, her legs shaking beneath her skirt. The hallway was narrow and dim, lit by a single oil lamp. She found room 6 and knocked. "Come in." She pushed open the door and stepped into a small room that held a bed, a table, and a man sitting in a chair by the window. Owen Tucker was perhaps 23 years old, lean and long-limbed, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of summer grass. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a gun belt hung from the back of his chair. "You have 3 minutes," he said without preamble. "Explain why you are using Garrett's name to get my attention." Clara closed the door behind her and stood straight. "My name is Clara Crane. 3 hours ago, my father sold my mother to Marcus Garrett for $20. I want to hire you to help me get her back." Owen Tucker studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Your father sold your mother. That is quite a story." "It is not a story, it is the truth." And you think you can just ride up to Garrett's ranch and take her back? No, Clara said. I think I need help. I heard you have a history with Garrett. I heard you would do anything to see him ruined. Owen's eyes narrowed. Who told you that? It does not matter. Is it true? He stood up, and Clara was suddenly aware of how tall he was, how he moved like a predator in the small space. Even if it were true, what makes you think I would risk my neck for a girl I have never met and her mother? Because I can pay you. Clara pulled out her small purse and emptied it on the table. The bills and coins made a pathetic little pile. This is all I have. $17.40. But I will get more. I will work. I will do whatever it takes. Stop. Owen's voice was softer now. He looked at the money, then at Clara's face. Put your money away. I am not taking it. Clara's heart sank. Please, I have nowhere else to turn. I said I am not taking your money, Owen repeated. I did not say I would not help you. Hope flared in Clara's chest, almost painful in its intensity. You will help me. I will help you because Marcus Garrett is a bastard who deserves everything coming to him, Owen said quietly. 2 years ago, he accused my brother of stealing cattle. He had him hanged without a trial. My brother was 19 years old and innocent of every charge. The words hung in the air between them. Clara swallowed hard. I am sorry. So am I. Owen walked to the window and looked out at the dark street below. But being sorry does not bring him back. And it does not stop Garrett from doing whatever he wants to whoever he wants. He turned to face her. If I help you, this will not be simple. Garrett has 20 hired guns on his ranch at any given time. We cannot just ride in and take your mother. Then what do? We need more people. We need a plan. And we need to move fast because once Garrett has your mother at his ranch, he will make sure she never leaves. How do we get more people? Clara asked. Owen was quiet for a moment thinking. There is a man I know. He runs a ranch about 20 miles north of here. He is a good man, fair, and he has no love for Garrett either. His name is James Morrison. If I can convince him that Garrett needs to be taken down a notch, he might lend us some of his men. Will you try? Yes, Owen met her eyes. But I want you to understand something. This is dangerous. People could die, you could die. I do not care, Clara said fiercely. My mother is all I have. My father is a drunk who sold her like property. If I do not fight for her, who will? Owen studied her for another long moment and something shifted in his expression. You can stay here tonight. I will sleep downstairs. Tomorrow morning we ride to Morrison's ranch. I can sleep in the stable. I do not want to take your room. You are not sleeping in a stable, Owen said firmly. Take the bed, I will be fine. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was suddenly crashing over her in waves. The day had been endless, filled with horrors she could never have imagined that morning. Thank you, she said quietly. Owen nodded and grabbed his gun belt, buckling it around his hips. Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone but me. He left, and Clara locked the door as instructed. She sat on the edge of the bed, her whole body trembling now that she was alone. She had done it. She had taken the first step, but the enormity of what lay ahead pressed down on her like a physical weight. She thought of her mother, trapped in that black carriage, being carried farther and farther away. She thought of Marcus Garrett's cold eyes and cruel mouth. She thought of her father's shaking hands counting those terrible coins. And she thought of Owen Tucker, who had lost his brother to the same man and was willing to help a desperate girl he had just met. Clara lay down on the bed without undressing, staring at the ceiling. Sleep seemed impossible, but eventually exhaustion claimed her and she drifted into troubled dreams. She woke to knocking on the door. Pale dawn light filtered through the thin curtains. Clara, it is Owen. Time to go. Clara scrambled up, smoothing her wrinkled dress. She opened the door to find Owen looking surprisingly fresh, as if he had actually slept well on whatever surface he had found downstairs. He held 2 wrapped parcels. "Breakfast," he said, handing her one. "We can eat while we ride." Clara followed him downstairs and out to the stable behind the saloon. Owen saddled a tall bay gelding, then looked at Clara. "Can you ride?" "Yes. My mother taught me when I was small." "Good." He brought out a smaller gray mare and saddled her quickly. Within minutes, they were riding out of Ukiah as the town began to wake around them. The California countryside stretched out before them, golden hills dotted with oak trees. It would have been beautiful if Clara's heart had not been so heavy. She ate the bread and cheese Owen had brought, forcing herself to swallow even though her stomach was in knots. "Tell me about your mother," Owen said after they had been riding for an hour. Clara glanced at him, surprised by the question. "Why?" "Because if I am going to risk my life to save her, I would like to know what kind of woman she is." Clara considered this. "She is kind," she said finally. "She never raises her voice even when my father comes home drunk. She sings when she cooks. She taught me to read using the Bible and the almanac. When I was 10, I broke my arm falling from a tree, and she sat up with me for 3 nights straight while the fever burned." Her voice grew thick. "She deserves better than what my father gave her. She deserves better than being sold to a monster. She has a daughter who is willing to fight for her," Owen said quietly. "That is something." They rode in silence for a while, the sun climbing higher, the heat building. Clara watched Owen from the corner of her eye, trying to understand this man who had agreed to help her. He sat his horse with easy grace, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. There was a watchfulness to him, a sense that he was always ready for trouble. "Why do you live in a saloon?" Clara asked suddenly. Owen glanced at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "That is what you want to know. I am curious. I move around a lot. Saloons are convenient, nobody asks questions. What do you do, I mean, for money?" "Whatever needs doing," Owen said. "I have worked cattle drives, done security for mines, tracked down stolen horses. I am good with a gun and I am not afraid of hard work." "But you are not a gunfighter," Clara said. It was not a question. "No," Owen agreed. "I have killed men, but only when they forced my hand. I am not looking for a reputation." Clara nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand that Owen Tucker was a complicated man, one who had been shaped by loss and violence but had not let it turn him cruel. They reached the Morrison Ranch around midday. It was a sprawling operation, with a large main house and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed on the hills, and Clara could see men working in the corrals. A man came out to meet them as they rode up. He was in his early 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face. "Owen Tucker." "I heard you were in the area, James." Owen dismounted and shook the man's hand. "I need to talk to you. It is important." James Morrison looked at Clara with open curiosity. "Who is the girl?" "Clara Crane. She is the reason I am here." James invited them inside, and they sat at a large wooden table while his wife brought out coffee and cold chicken. Clara's stomach growled, reminding her that she had barely eaten since yesterday. "Eat," James said kindly. "Then tell me what this is about." Clara ate while Owen explained the situation. He laid it out clearly and without embellishment. Marcus Garrett had purchased Clara's mother from her drunk father, and they intended to get her back. He needed men, and he needed James's support. James listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When Owen finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Garrett is a powerful man," he said finally. "He has friends in Sacramento and San Francisco. If we go after him, there will be consequences." "I know," Owen said, "but he cannot keep getting away with this. How many people has he hurt? How many lives has he destroyed?" "Too many," James admitted. He looked at Clara. You understand what you are asking for, girl. This is not some dime novel adventure. Men will die. I understand, Clara said steadily, but my mother is worth fighting for. James studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, I will give you 5 men. They are all good fighters and they hate Garrett as much as anyone. But you need more than that. Garrett has 20 guns at his ranch, maybe more. Who else can we approach? Owen asked. James was quiet again, thinking. Then his eyes lit up. The Apache. There is a group camped about 15 miles east of here, near the river. Their leader is a man named Stone Wolf. He is young, maybe your age, Owen, but smart and fierce. Garrett's men killed 3 of his people last year over a water dispute. If anyone has reason to want Garrett dead, it is Stone Wolf. Will he help us? Clara asked. I do not know, James said honestly, but it is worth asking. The Apache are excellent fighters and they know this land better than anyone. Owen nodded. Then that is where we go next. James stood up. I will have my men ready by tomorrow evening, but Owen, be careful with the Apache. They have every reason to distrust white people right now. I know, Owen said, but we have to try. They left the Morrison Ranch with directions to the Apache camp and a warning to approach carefully. Clara's head was spinning. This morning it had been just her and Owen. Now they had 5 men promised, and they were going to ask the Apache for help. It was beginning to feel real, like something that might actually work. They rode east through the afternoon heat, following the river. Clara's dress was soaked with sweat, her face burning despite the wide-brimmed hat Owen had insisted she borrow from James's wife. She drank from her canteen sparingly, knowing water was precious. Have you ever met Apache before? Clara asked. A few times, Owen said. They are not the savages people make them out to be. They are just trying to survive in a world that keeps taking everything from them. Clara nodded. She had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Stories of raids and violence, of settlers killed and homes burned. But she had also heard other stories, quieter ones, about land stolen and promises broken, about whole villages slaughtered by soldiers. They found the Apache camp as the sun was setting, a collection of wickiups near the river. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and Clara could see women working while children played nearby. Men stood guard at the perimeter, and they spotted Owen and Clara long before the 2 riders reached the camp. Hands where we can see them, Owen said quietly, and let me do the talking. 3 Apache men approached on foot, rifles ready. They were lean and dark, dressed in a mix of traditional clothing and items taken from white settlements. The one in front was perhaps 24 years old, with long black hair and eyes that missed nothing. He said something in Apache, his tone a challenge. I am looking for Stone Wolf, Owen said clearly. I come to talk, not to fight. The young man studied Owen for a long moment, then spoke in accented English. I am Stone Wolf. Who are you? My name is Owen Tucker. This is Clara Crane. We have a proposition for you. I do not do business with white people. Even if that business involves killing Marcus Garrett, Stone Wolf's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. You have my attention. Dismount and follow me. They dismounted and followed Stone Wolf into the camp. Clara was acutely aware of the eyes on her, of the women whispering and the children staring. She kept close to Owen, her heart hammering. Stone Wolf led them to a fire and gestured for them to sit. An older woman brought them water in clay cups, and Clara drank gratefully. Stone Wolf sat across from them, waiting. Owen explained the situation for the 2nd time that day. Clara watched Stone Wolf's face as he listened, trying to gauge his reaction. His expression remained neutral until Owen mentioned that Garrett's men had killed members of his tribe. Marcus Garrett is a disease, Stone Wolf said when Owen finished. He spreads across this land like poison. He takes what is not his and destroys what he cannot take. My people would dance to see him dead. Then help us, Owen said. We are planning to attack his ranch and free Clara's mother. We have 5 men from James Morrison's ranch. If you can give us 10 warriors, we have a chance. And what do I get in return? Stone Wolf asked. Revenge, Owen said bluntly, and the satisfaction of watching Garrett's empire burn. Stone Wolf looked at Clara. You are very young to be making war. I am old enough to fight for my mother, Clara said, meeting his gaze. Something that might have been respect crossed Stone Wolf's face. He stood up. I will speak with my warriors. Come back tomorrow at sunrise. I will have an answer for you then. Thank you, Clara said. Stone Wolf nodded and walked away, leaving them by the fire. Owen stood and offered Clara his hand. Come on, we will camp upstream. They rode a short distance from the Apache camp and made their own small fire as night fell. Owen unsaddled the horses and laid out their bedrolls while Clara gathered firewood. It felt strange, being alone with a man she had only met yesterday, but Clara found she trusted Owen in a way she had never trusted anyone except her mother. You think he will help us? Clara asked as they sat by the fire, eating dried meat and hardtack. I think so, Owen said. But he is right to be cautious. His people have been betrayed too many times. Clara stared into the flames, watching them dance and flicker. I cannot stop thinking about her, about what Garrett might be doing to her. Owen was quiet for a moment. Your mother is strong, Clara. She raised a daughter who was brave enough to walk into a saloon and demand help. She will survive until we can get to her. How do you know? Because she has you waiting for her, Owen said simply. That is worth surviving for. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She could not afford to break down, not now. Tell me about your brother. Owen looked surprised by the question. Why? Because you are helping me save my mother, and I want to know about the brother you lost. Owen was quiet for so long that Clara thought he would not answer. Then he started talking, his voice soft in the darkness. His name was Adam. He was 3 years younger than me, always smiling, always seeing the best in people. He wanted to be a rancher, save up enough money to buy his own land. He worked for Garrett for 6 months, and then one day Garrett claimed 50 head of cattle were missing. He accused Adam of stealing them and selling them across the border. But he did not do it, Clara said. No, Garrett's own foreman had sold those cattle and pocketed the money. But Garrett needed a scapegoat, and Adam was convenient. They hanged him from an oak tree on Garrett's property, and when I went to cut him down, they ran me off with guns. Owen's voice was rough now. I have spent the last 2 years waiting for a chance to make Garrett pay. When you walked into that saloon and said his name, I knew it was time. Clara reached over and touched Owen's hand. He looked at her in surprise, and she squeezed his fingers gently. I am sorry about Adam, and I am grateful that you are helping me. You could have turned me away, but you did not. Owen turned his hand over and held hers for a moment, his calloused palm warm against her skin. Some things are worth fighting for, he said quietly. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, the fire crackling between them. Then Owen gently pulled away and stood up. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day. Clara lay down in her bedroll and stared up at the stars. They were so bright here, far from town, like someone had scattered diamonds across black velvet. She thought about her mother, somewhere in Garrett's fortress. She thought about Owen and his dead brother. She thought about Stone Wolf and his murdered people. Tomorrow she would find out if the Apache would help. Tomorrow they would start planning the attack. Tomorrow the war would truly begin. She woke to the smell of coffee and found Owen already up, tending the fire. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky. Clara sat up, pushing hair out of her face. Good morning, Owen said, handing her a tin cup of coffee. "Thank you." Clara sipped the bitter brew, feeling it clear the cobwebs from her mind. "Are you nervous?" "Always," Owen said. "But that is not necessarily a bad thing. Nervous keeps you sharp." They packed up their camp and rode back to the Apache village as the sun rose. Stone Wolf was waiting for them along with about a dozen warriors. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "We will help you," he said without preamble. "I will give you 12 warriors, including myself, but there are conditions." "Name them," Owen said. "When Garrett is dead, his land goes back to the people he stole it from. The water rights he claimed return to my tribe, and any of his men who surrender will be tried fairly, not lynched." Owen nodded. "Agreed." Stone Wolf looked at Clara. "And the girl fights with us. If she is willing to start this war, she must be willing to see it through." "I am," Clara said immediately. "Then we have an agreement." Stone Wolf extended his hand and Owen shook it firmly. Then Stone Wolf turned to Clara and did the same. His grip was strong, his palm rough with calluses. "We leave tomorrow at dawn. Be ready." They spent the rest of the day at the Apache camp, planning the attack. James Morrison arrived in the afternoon with his 5 men, all of them experienced fighters. They spread out a rough map of Garrett's ranch that James had drawn from memory, marking the main house, the bunkhouse, the barn, and the corrals. "Garrett's men will be concentrated here," James said, pointing to the bunkhouse. "They will have guards posted around the perimeter, probably 4 at night, rotating every few hours." "We hit them before dawn," Stone Wolf said. "When men are slowest, least alert." "We need to get Clara's mother out first," Owen said, "before the fighting starts. If Garrett realizes we are there, he might use her as a hostage." "I will go in with 2 of my warriors," Stone Wolf said. "We can move quietly. We get the woman out, then signal the attack." "How will you know where she is?" Clara asked. "The main house is not that large," James said. "And if Garrett brought her there as his woman, she will be in the upstairs bedroom. That is where he kept the last one." Clara's stomach turned. "The last one?" James looked uncomfortable. "Garrett has a history of taking women who catch his eye. Usually they belong to men who owe him money or need his favor. He keeps them for a few months, then sends them away with enough money to stay quiet." "That is not going to happen to my mother," Clara said fiercely. "No," Owen agreed. "It is not." They planned late into the evening, going over every detail. Clara listened and learned, her mind absorbing information about guard rotations and lines of sight, and how to approach without being seen. She had never imagined she would be part of something like this, sitting around a fire with cowboys and Apache warriors, plotting an assault. But here she was, and she was not going to back down. That night, Clara lay in her bedroll near the fire, too keyed up to sleep. Stone Wolf sat across from her, checking his weapons. He glanced up and caught her watching him. "You are afraid," he said. "It was not a question." "Yes," Clara admitted, "but I am doing it anyway." "That is courage," Stone Wolf said. "Fear without action is cowardice. Fear with action is bravery." "Have you done this before, attacked white men's ranches?" "Once," Stone Wolf said. "When I was younger, it did not go well, but I have learned since then." Clara studied him in the firelight. He was handsome in a way that was completely different from Owen, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see through to your soul. "Why do you trust Owen?" "I do not trust him," Stone Wolf said bluntly. "But I trust that he wants Garrett dead as much as I do. That is enough. And me." "Do you trust me?" Stone Wolf smiled slightly. "You are either very brave or very foolish. I have not decided which. But I respect that you are willing to fight for your mother. Family is sacred." "Yes," Clara said softly. "It is." She must have fallen asleep eventually, because she woke to Owen gently shaking her shoulder. "Clara, time to go." The camp was already stirring, warriors and cowboys saddling horses and checking weapons. Clara stood up, her body stiff from sleeping on the ground. The sky was still dark, stars fading as dawn approached. Owen handed her something wrapped in cloth. "I got this from James yesterday. I think you should have it." Clara unwrapped the cloth and found a knife in a leather sheath. The blade was about 6 inches long, sharp and well-maintained. "Owen, I cannot." "You can," Owen said firmly. "And you will. I know you have your father's revolver, but a knife is quieter and sometimes more useful. Strap it to your belt." Clara did as he said, feeling the unfamiliar weight against her hip. She looked up at Owen, and in the gray pre-dawn light she could see the concern in his eyes. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. "You could stay here, let us handle it." "No," Clara said. "I am seeing this through." Owen nodded, and something passed between them, some understanding that went deeper than words. Then he turned away to saddle his horse, and Clara did the same. They rode out as the first light touched the horizon. 20 people moving through the California hills, united by hatred of one man and a determination to see justice done. Clara rode near the front, between Owen and Stone Wolf, her heart hammering but her hands steady on the reins. Garrett's ranch was about 15 miles south, a journey of perhaps 3 hours. They rode in silence, conserving energy, each person lost in their own thoughts. Clara thought about her mother, pictured her face, tried to send a message across the miles. "Hold on, Mama, I am coming." As they drew closer, Owen called a halt. They left the horses with 2 of Morrison's men and continued on foot, moving quietly through the pre-dawn darkness. Clara could see lights in the distance now, the glow of the main house and the bunkhouse where Garrett's men slept. Stone Wolf appeared beside her, moving so silently she nearly jumped. "Stay close to Owen," he said softly. "When the fighting starts, do not try to be a hero, just stay alive." Then he was gone, melting into the darkness with 2 of his warriors. They were going after Clara's mother. Owen gathered everyone together. "Morrison and his men take the bunkhouse. The rest of us spread out and create a perimeter. When you hear Stone Wolf's signal, we go in fast and hard. Remember, we want Garrett alive if possible. He needs to answer for what he has done." Everyone nodded and moved to their positions. Clara followed Owen as they crept closer to the main house. Her mouth was dry, her palms sweating. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of grass, the distant bark of a dog, her own breathing. They crouched behind a water trough, watching the house. Clara could see a guard walking the perimeter, a rifle slung over his shoulder. He looked bored, half asleep. He had no idea what was coming. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Clara's legs cramped from crouching, but she did not move. Beside her, Owen was still as stone, his hand resting on his gun. Then she saw movement near the house. A window opening on the 2nd floor. Shadows moving inside. Stone Wolf and his warriors were in. More movement. A figure being helped through the window, lowered down to someone waiting below. Even in the darkness, even from this distance, Clara knew that shape, that movement. "Mama," relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly gasped aloud. Owen's hand closed on her arm, steadying her. "Wait," he breathed. Stone Wolf and his warriors dropped from the window and moved swiftly away from the house, carrying Eliza between them. They made it perhaps 50 yards before a shout went up from inside the house. "Now," Owen yelled. Everything happened at once. Gunfire erupted from the direction of the bunkhouse. Men poured out of the building, some in their underwear, scrambling for weapons. Morrison and his men cut them down efficiently, ruthlessly. Owen and Clara ran toward the main house as the front door flew open and Marcus Garrett appeared, a shotgun in his hands. He fired wildly into the darkness, cursing. Owen returned fire and Garrett stumbled back inside. "Go around the back," Owen shouted to Clara. "Find another way in." Clara ran, her legs pumping, the knife bouncing against her hip. She heard gunfire behind her, men screaming, horses whinnying in panic. She rounded the corner of the house and nearly collided with a man coming the other way. He grabbed her and Clara reacted on pure instinct, pulling the knife and driving it into his side. The man gasped and fell, and Clara stared at him in shock. She had just stabbed someone. Blood was pooling beneath him, black in the pre-dawn light. "Clara!" Owen's voice snapped her out of it. He appeared beside her, grabbed her arm. "Stay with me." They found a back door and kicked it open. Inside, the house was chaos. Garrett was somewhere, shouting orders. Clara and Owen moved through rooms filled with expensive furniture, paintings, all the trappings of wealth built on cruelty. They found Garrett in his study trying to load his shotgun with shaking hands. Owen leveled his pistol. "Drop it." Garrett looked up and Clara saw recognition dawn in his eyes. "Tucker, I should have known you were behind this." "Where is the woman?" Owen demanded. "Gone," Garrett said. "Your Apache friends took her. But you are all dead men. I have men in Sacramento, friends in high places. You have nothing," Stone Wolf said, appearing in the doorway. He had blood on his hands and his eyes were cold. "Your men are dead or surrendered. Your ranch is ours now. And you are going to pay for every life you destroyed." Garrett's face went white. "You cannot do this. I am a citizen. I have rights like the rights you gave my brother," Owen said softly. "When you hanged him without a trial, that was different." "He was a thief. He was innocent," Owen said. "And you killed him anyway." Clara stepped forward. "Where is my mother?" Garrett looked at her and his lip curled. "The girl. Your whore of a mother is lucky I took her in. She should be grateful." Clara slapped him so hard her palm stung. "Do not you dare speak about her that way. She is worth 1,000 of you." Garrett touched his reddening cheek, his eyes full of hate. "You are all going to hang for this." "We will see," Owen said. He looked at Stone Wolf. "Where is Eliza?" "Safe. One of my warriors is taking her away from here." "I want to see her," Clara said. "Soon," Stone Wolf promised. "First, we deal with this." They dragged Garrett outside. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The yard was a battlefield. Bodies lay scattered in the dust, some of Garrett's men, but also one of Morrison's and 2 Apache warriors. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. The surviving members of Garrett's crew were lined up by the barn, hands bound. They looked terrified, and Clara could not blame them. Stone Wolf's warriors surrounded them, rifles ready. Morrison approached, blood on his sleeve but otherwise unharmed. "It is done. We lost 3, they lost 17. "And the rest?" Owen asked, nodding toward the prisoners. "They surrendered. What do you want to do with them?" Owen looked at Stone Wolf, then at Garrett. "We take them to Ukiah. Let the law decide their fate." "The law?" Garrett laughed bitterly. "You think the law will touch me? I own the law in this state." "Maybe," Owen said, "but at least everyone will know what you did. They will know you murdered a 19-year-old boy for a crime he did not commit. They will know you bought women like property. Your name will be mud, Garrett. Even if you escape the noose, you will never have respect again." Garrett's face went purple with rage, but he did not respond. Clara stood in the yard of Garrett's ranch, watching as the sun climbed higher, and felt a strange emptiness. They had won. Her mother was safe. But 3 good men had died to make it happen, and she had killed a man with her own hands. Nothing felt simple anymore. "Clara." She turned to see Stone Wolf approaching. He gestured toward the trees beyond the house. "Your mother is there. She has been asking for you." Clara ran. She crashed through the underbrush, not caring about the branches that tore at her dress and scratched her face. And then she saw her, sitting on a fallen log, wrapped in a blanket, one of the Apache women beside her. "Mama!" Eliza looked up and her face crumpled. "Clara!" They collided in a tangle of arms and tears. Clara held her mother and sobbed, all the fear and rage and determination of the past 2 days pouring out of her. Eliza stroked her hair and whispered her name over and over like a prayer. "I told you I would come," Clara gasped. "I told you. I know, my brave girl, I know." Eliza pulled back to look at Clara's face, touching her cheeks, her hair, as if making sure she was real. "But you should not have done this. You could have been killed." "I had help," Clara said. She looked back toward the ranch. "There is a man, Owen Tucker. He lost his brother to Garrett and he helped me. Without him, I never could have done this." "I want to thank him," Eliza said. They walked back together, Clara supporting her mother. Eliza looked exhausted, her dress torn, but she was alive and whole. Clara kept one arm around her waist, needing the physical contact to believe this was real. Owen was waiting near the house. When he saw them approaching, something eased in his expression. "Mrs. Crane, I am glad you are safe, Mr. Tucker," Eliza said. "My daughter tells me I have you to thank for my rescue." "I had my own reasons for wanting Garrett taken down," Owen said. "But yes, I helped." Eliza studied him for a long moment, and Clara saw understanding dawn in her mother's eyes. She had always been perceptive, able to read people better than anyone Clara knew. "You lost someone to him," she said softly. "My brother," Owen confirmed. "Then we are both in your debt," Eliza said. The ride back to Ukiah was slow. Garrett and his men were tied to horses, guarded by Morrison's men and Stone Wolf's warriors. Clara rode beside her mother, unwilling to let her out of arm's reach. Owen rode nearby, keeping watch. Stone Wolf appeared on his other side. "That was well done," he said to Owen. "You did most of the work," Owen replied. "We worked together, as it should be." Stone Wolf glanced back at Clara and Eliza. "The girl has courage. Not many would do what she did." "She loves her mother," Owen said simply. Stone Wolf looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them. "And you care for the girl?" It was not a question. Owen did not answer, but his silence was answer enough. They reached Ukiah as the sun was setting, a ragged procession of wounded warriors and exhausted cowboys. People came out of their houses to stare. Word had already spread somehow, as it always did in small towns. Marcus Garrett captured. His reign of terror ended by a girl and her allies. The sheriff met them in the street, flanked by deputies. He looked at Garrett, at the bound men, at the Apache warriors with their rifles. "What in God's name happened?" "Marcus Garrett purchased Eliza Crane from her husband 2 days ago," Owen said. "We went to get her back. His men resisted. This is the result." The sheriff's face went pale. "He bought her. That is slavery. That is illegal." "Tell that to Thomas Crane," Clara said coldly. "He took Garrett's money and traded his wife for it." The sheriff looked like he wanted to argue, but he could not. Everyone knew what had happened. It would be all over town by now. "I need to take statements from all of you. And these prisoners need to be locked up until the circuit judge arrives." "Lock Garrett up," Owen said. "The rest of his men were just following orders. They deserve a fair trial." The sheriff nodded and began organizing his deputies. Stone Wolf gathered his warriors. "We will make camp outside town," he said to Owen. "When the trial begins, we will be there to testify." "Thank you," Owen said, "for everything." Stone Wolf clasped his forearm briefly, then turned to Clara. "You fought well. Your mother should be proud." "Thank you," Clara said. "I will not forget what you did for us." Stone Wolf nodded and rode away, his warriors following. Clara watched them go, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and sadness. These men had risked their lives for strangers, united only by their hatred of a common enemy. "Clara." "Mama." Clara turned to see her father standing on the sidewalk, his face slack with shock. Thomas Crane looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. Eliza stiffened. Clara felt rage surge through her, hot and violent. "You," Clara said, her voice shaking. "You sold her." Thomas took a step toward them. "Eliza, I am so sorry. I was drunk. I did not know what I was doing." "You knew exactly what you were doing," Eliza said, her voice like ice. "You sold me for drinking money. I made a mistake. Please come home. We can fix this." "There is no home," Clara said. "Not with you. We are done." Thomas looked stricken. "Clara, I am your father." "You stopped being my father the moment you counted those coins," Clara said. She turned to Owen. "Is there a hotel in this town, somewhere clean?" "The Eldridge Hotel on Main Street," Owen said. "I will take you there." "Wait," Thomas said desperately. "Please, I can change. I will stop drinking. Just give me another chance." Eliza looked at him, and Clara saw no love in her eyes, only exhaustion and disgust. "Goodbye, Thomas. I hope you choke on Garrett's silver." She turned away, and Clara went with her, leaving Thomas standing alone in the street. Owen followed them to the hotel, and Clara used the last of her money to pay for a room. It was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the street. "I will be at the Silver Spur if you need me," Owen said from the doorway. "Wait," Clara said. She looked at her mother. "Mama, do you mind if I walk Mr. Tucker out?" Eliza smiled faintly. "Go ahead, sweetheart. I will be fine." Clara followed Owen downstairs and out onto the hotel porch. The street was busy, people still talking about the day's events. She and Owen stood in the shadows, away from prying eyes. "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything. I could not have done this without you." "You would have found a way," Owen said. "You are the most determined person I have ever met." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "What will you do now? Will you stay in Ukiah?" "For a while," Owen said. "At least until the trial is over. I want to see Garrett convicted for what he did to Adam." "And after that?" Owen was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. I have been drifting for 2 years, looking for purpose. Maybe it is time to find a place to settle." Clara's heart was beating too fast. She knew she should not say what she was about to say, but she could not stop herself. "You could stay here." "In Ukiah." Owen looked at her, really looked at her, and Clara saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Why would I do that?" "Because," Clara said, and her voice was barely a whisper, "I would like to see you again, after all this is over." Owen reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. "I would like that too." They stood there for a long moment, the sounds of the town fading into background noise. Then Owen stepped back. "Get some rest, Clara. You have been through hell." He turned and walked away, and Clara watched until he disappeared around the corner. Then she went back upstairs to her mother. The next few days passed in a blur of statements and questions and visits from townspeople who wanted to hear the story firsthand. Clara told it over and over until the words felt meaningless, but she bore it because she knew it was necessary. The more people who knew what Garrett had done, the harder it would be for him to escape justice. Stone Wolf and his warriors stayed camped outside town, and Clara visited them daily, bringing food and news. She and Stone Wolf developed an easy friendship, based on mutual respect and shared experience. He told her stories about his people, about the old ways that were disappearing, and she listened with a hunger to understand. But it was Owen she thought about most. Owen, who appeared at odd hours to check on her and her mother, who made sure they had everything they needed, who looked at Clara in a way that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. One evening, about a week after the raid, Owen asked Clara to take a walk with him. Eliza smiled knowingly and shooed them out the door. They walked through the town and out along the river, where the water ran silver in the moonlight. Clara felt nervous and excited and terrified all at once. "The trial starts tomorrow," Owen said. "James Morrison is coming to testify. So is Stone Wolf." "Will it be enough?" Clara asked. "I think so," Owen said. "Too many people know what Garrett did. The judge cannot ignore it." They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the rush of water and the chirp of crickets. Then Owen stopped and turned to face her. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Her heart leaped. "What?" "These past days, getting to know you, seeing your courage and your heart." Owen paused, seeming to struggle for words. "You are extraordinary, and I am falling in love with you." Clara felt like all the air had left her lungs. "Owen, I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know we barely know each other, but I have never felt this way about anyone, and I needed you to know." Clara reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under her palm. "It is not too soon," she said. "Because I feel the same way." Owen's eyes widened. "You do?" "Yes," Clara said. "From the moment you agreed to help me, even though you had no reason to, from every moment since then. Yes." Owen pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, and then deeper as Clara wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. She had never been kissed before, but it felt right, felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I want to build a life with you, Clara, if you will have me." "Yes," Clara said. "Yes, yes, yes." They stood there by the river for a long time, holding each other, making promises in whispered words. When they finally returned to town, Clara felt like she was walking on air. Eliza took one look at her daughter's face and smiled. "I see you had a good walk." "Mama," Clara said, sitting on the bed beside her. "Owen and we are going to be together. After the trial, we are going to build a life together." Eliza cupped Clara's face in her hands. "He is a good man. And he loves you. I can see it in the way he looks at you." "And Papa?" Clara asked quietly. Eliza's expression hardened. "I am done with your father, Clara. I filed for divorce yesterday. The lawyer says it should not take long given what happened." "What will you do?" "I am going to start over," Eliza said. "I have been thinking about opening a boarding house. Ukiah is growing and there is a need for respectable lodging. I have some money saved that your father never knew about. It is enough to make a start." Clara hugged her mother tight. "You are the strongest woman I know." "I learned from the best," Eliza said. "My own mother survived the crossing from Missouri in a covered wagon. She taught me that women can survive anything if they have to." "And we have," Clara said. The trial of Marcus Garrett began the next morning in the Ukiah courthouse, a simple wooden building that was packed to bursting with spectators. The circuit judge was a stern man named Hawthorne, who listened to hours of testimony with an impassive expression. James Morrison testified about Garrett's land grabs and violence. Stone Wolf testified about the murder of his people. Owen testified about his brother's lynching. And Clara testified about watching her mother being sold like property. Through it all, Garrett sat silent, his lawyer arguing that the accusations were exaggerated, that Garrett was a pillar of the community, that this was all a conspiracy by jealous rivals. But the evidence was too damning. The burned remains of Morrison's barn. The bodies of Stone Wolf's murdered relatives. The rope mark still visible on the oak tree where Adam Tucker had died. And Thomas Crane's testimony, given in a broken, whiskey-rough voice, that yes, he had sold his wife to Marcus Garrett for $20 silver. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman stood up and read the verdict, guilty on all counts. Judge Hawthorne sentenced Marcus Garrett to hang for murder and to serve 20 years for kidnapping and illegal detention. His lands were to be seized and distributed among his victims as restitution. Garrett exploded in rage, screaming that they could not do this, that he had rights, that they would all pay. The bailiffs dragged him from the courtroom, still cursing. Outside, Clara found Stone Wolf waiting. "Justice," he said simply. "Yes," Clara agreed, "for all of us." Stone Wolf clasped her shoulder briefly. "My people are leaving tomorrow. We will go north, find new land. But I want you to know, if you ever need help, you have friends among the Apache." "And you have friends here," Clara said. She looked at Owen, who had come to stand beside her. "Both of you." Stone Wolf nodded to Owen. "Take care of her." "I will," Owen promised. Clara watched Stone Wolf walk away and felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. So much had changed in such a short time. She had started this journey as a desperate girl trying to save her mother. She was ending it as a woman who had fought a war and won, who had found love in the ashes of tragedy, who had learned that courage came not from fearlessness, but from acting despite fear. The hanging took place 3 days later. Clara did not attend. She did not need to see Marcus Garrett die to know that justice had been served. Instead, she spent the day with her mother and Owen, planning their future. Eliza had found a large house on the edge of town, a place that had belonged to a family that had moved to San Francisco. It had 8 bedrooms and could easily be converted to a boarding house. She was negotiating the purchase with money from Garrett's seized assets, part of the restitution granted by the judge. "You could live here too," Eliza said to Clara and Owen. "There is plenty of room." Clara looked at Owen and he smiled. "We talked about it. We want to buy land nearby, start our own ranch. Something small to begin with, just a few cattle and horses, but we would like to be close to you." "I would like that," Eliza said softly. She looked at Owen. "You are good for my daughter, Mr. Tucker. I can see that you love her." "More than anything," Owen said. Clara and Owen were married in October of 1873 in a simple ceremony at the new church in Ukiah. Eliza cried happy tears, and James Morrison stood as Owen's best man. Even Thomas Crane showed up, sober and broken, standing at the back of the church. Clara saw him but said nothing. He was a ghost from her past, no longer part of her future. Stone Wolf sent a wedding gift, a beautiful woven blanket made by the women of his tribe, decorated with symbols of strength and family. Clara hung it on the wall of their new home, a small ranch house on 40 acres of land that had once belonged to Garrett's empire. Life settled into a rhythm. Owen worked the ranch, building up their herd slowly and carefully. Clara helped where she could, learning about cattle and horses and the land. They were not rich, but they had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. Eliza's boarding house thrived. She had a gift for making people feel welcome, and soon she had a steady stream of lodgers. Miners passing through, families looking for a place to stay while they built their own homes, travelers who needed a clean bed and a good meal. She hired 2 women to help her, both of them widows who needed work, and together they built something beautiful. The years passed. Clara and Owen's ranch grew. They added more land, more cattle. Owen's reputation as a fair dealer and hard worker spread, and they prospered. Clara learned to ride like a cowboy, to rope and brand, to shoot straight when coyotes threatened the herd. She was happy in a way she had never imagined possible. In the spring of 1875, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Owen was overjoyed, and Eliza cried and fussed and immediately began knitting baby clothes. Clara felt a mix of excitement and terror, but mostly love, an overwhelming sense of love for the life growing inside her. Their son was born in December, healthy and strong, with his father's green eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Adam, after the brother Owen had lost. Eliza held her grandson and wept, and Owen kissed Clara's forehead and told her she was the bravest, most beautiful woman in the world. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, sickness and setbacks. But Clara and Owen faced them together, supported by Eliza and their community. The town of Ukiah grew around them, becoming more civilized, more prosperous. Stone Wolf visited occasionally, always welcome. He brought news of his people, of the constant struggle to maintain their way of life as more and more settlers pushed west. Clara and Owen helped where they could, using their influence to argue for fair treatment, to push back against the worst injustices. It was not enough, could never be enough, but it was something. Thomas Crane died in the winter of 1878, alone in a rented room above a saloon, his liver destroyed by drink. Clara attended his funeral because it seemed like the right thing to do, but she felt nothing. The man who had sold her mother had killed himself with whiskey years before his body finally gave out. By 1880, Clara and Owen had 3 children, Adam, and then twin girls named Sarah and Margaret. Their ranch was prosperous, their home filled with laughter. Eliza's boarding house was a fixture of the community, and she showed no signs of slowing down. One evening, Clara stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the golden hills. Owen came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Clara said. "How different life is from what I imagined when I was 17. How far we have come. Any regrets?" "None," Clara said firmly. She turned in his arms to face him. "You saved me, Owen Tucker. You and Stone Wolf and James Morrison and everyone who helped. You gave me my mother back, but you also gave me a future." "You saved yourself," Owen said. "I just helped. You were the one brave enough to walk into that saloon and demand justice." "We saved each other," Clara said. She kissed him softly. "And we built something beautiful." Inside the house, they could hear the children playing, Eliza's voice telling them to wash up for supper. It was such an ordinary moment, such a small slice of happiness, but Clara treasured it. She had learned not to take such moments for granted. That night, after the children were in bed and Eliza had gone back to her own home, Clara and Owen sat by the fire. Owen was reading a book, and Clara was mending one of Adam's shirts. It was peaceful, domestic, everything she had never known she wanted. "I love you," Clara said suddenly. Owen looked up and smiled, the expression transforming his face. "I love you too. Always have, always will." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not come to you that night? If I had been too afraid?" "All the time," Owen admitted. "But you were not afraid. Or rather, you were afraid, but you did it anyway. That is what makes you extraordinary." "We are extraordinary," Clara corrected. "Together." Owen set down his book and pulled her into his arms. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, surrounded by the life they had built. Outside, the California night was soft and warm, full of promise. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Clara and Owen added to their family, welcoming 2 more sons, Thomas and William. The ranch grew until it was one of the most respected in the region. Clara became known as a shrewd businesswoman, involved in the town's development, and a fierce advocate for women's rights and fair treatment of the Apache. Owen mellowed with age, the hard edges worn smooth by love and family. He taught his children to ride and rope, to be honest and hardworking, to stand up for what was right. He told them stories about their Uncle Adam, about the injustice that had sparked a war, about a girl who had been brave enough to fight for her mother. Eliza lived to be 78 years old, sharp and fierce until the end. She saw her grandchildren grow and thrive, saw Clara become a leader in the community. When she died in 1896, peacefully in her sleep, The whole town mourned. Her boarding house was left to Clara, who continued to run it with the help of her daughters. Stone Wolf visited one last time in 1898. He was older now, gray-haired and worn by the struggle to keep his people safe in a world that had no place for them. But when he saw Clara and Owen surrounded by their children and grandchildren, he smiled. "You did well," he said, "both of you." "So did you," Clara said. "You survived. Your people survived." "Yes," Stone Wolf agreed. "We survive. It is what we do." They sat on the porch that evening, three old friends who had once been young and fierce and determined to see justice done. They talked about the old days, about the raid on Garrett's ranch, about the trial and the hanging. It seemed like another lifetime, another world. "You ever regret it?" Stone Wolf asked. "The violence, the death." "Sometimes," Clara admitted. "But then I think about what would have happened if we had done nothing. Garrett would have continued to hurt people. My mother would have been trapped. Your people would still have been murdered without consequence." "No, I do not regret fighting back." "Good," Stone Wolf said. "Neither do I." He left the next morning, and Clara never saw him again. She heard later that he had died in 1901, defending his people's land from encroachment. She mourned him as she would mourn a brother. Clara and Owen lived long, full lives. They saw the turn of the century, saw automobiles and electricity come to Ukiah, saw the world change in ways they could never have imagined. But through it all, their love remained constant, a foundation that never wavered. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1923, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Clara was 70 years old, her hair silver, her face lined with age. But when Owen looked at her, he still saw the fierce 17-year-old girl who had walked into a saloon and demanded his help. "I would do it all again," he told her that night, as they sat together on the porch of the ranch house they had built so many years ago. "Every moment, every hardship, just to be with you." "As would I," Clara said, holding his hand. "You are my great love, Owen Tucker. You always have been." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the California hills. In the distance, they could hear cows lowing, horses moving in the corral, the sounds of the life they had built together. Owen died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1925, at the age of 75. Clara mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 52 years together, years filled with love and family and purpose. Not everyone was so lucky. Clara lived another 3 years, active and sharp until the very end. She spent her last years telling stories to her great-grandchildren, making sure they understood where they came from, the courage it had taken to build the life they now enjoyed. She told them about the summer of 1873, when a drunk father sold his wife, and his daughter sparked a war to bring her back. She told them about the power of love, the necessity of fighting for what is right, the strength that comes from standing together against injustice. She died in the spring of 1928, surrounded by family, holding a photograph of Owen. Her last words were simple: "I am coming, my love. Wait for me." The town of Ukiah mourned Clara Crane Tucker as a founder, a leader, a woman who had shaped their community in countless ways. But to her family, she was simply Clara, brave, fierce, loving, extraordinary. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Clara and Owen walked together once more, young again, free from pain and age. Behind them walked Adam Tucker, reunited with his brother at last. And beside them, Eliza Crane, finally at peace. They had all earned their rest. They had all lived fully, loved deeply, and fought when fighting was necessary. They had built something lasting, something beautiful, something that would echo down through generations. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. The The ranch that Clara and Owen built still stands today, now run by their great-great-grandchildren. The boarding house Eliza founded became a historic landmark. And in the Ukiah town square, there is a plaque commemorating the raid on Garrett's ranch in August of 1873, when a community came together to stand against injustice. It reads simply, "In memory of those who fought for freedom and justice, may we never forget their courage." And beneath it, almost as an afterthought, started by a girl who refused to accept that her mother was property, finished by people who believed that love and family are worth fighting for. That girl was Clara Crane Tucker, and this is her story, a story of love found in the midst of tragedy, of courage born from desperation, of justice won through determination and sacrifice, of a life well lived despite the hardships that threatened to break her. Clara's legacy lived on, not just in the children and grandchildren who carried her name and her blood, but in the values she had instilled. Fight for what is right, stand up against injustice, never accept that people are property, and above all, love fiercely and without reservation. The Wild West was a hard place, a violent place, a place where the strong preyed on the weak and justice was often elusive. But it was also a place where extraordinary people could rise up, where love could bloom in the desert, where a determined girl and a grieving man could find each other and build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. This was their story. This was how it ended and how it continued, echoing down through time like ripples on water, forever expanding, forever touching new lives. And it all started with a daughter who refused to let her mother go, who sparked a war to bring her back, who found love in the most unexpected place, who became a legend. The end.